Hey everyone, it's your boy Dotbat, and I'm back again to dive deep into everyone's favorite fat man, Peter from Family Guy. Today we'll be taking an in-depth look into Peter's powers and abilities to determine where he truly stacks up. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that this guy has some crazy feats under his very wide belt. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can an American gag character like Peter Griffin scale to some of the amazing anime powerhouses out there? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to break down today. Be sure to stick around as I analyze scenes from Family Guy's 21 seasons to quantify Peter's attack potency, speed, hacks, and more. You might be surprised at how Peter's scaling stacks up to the top tiers from other popular verses. Did Peter beat Goku, Superman, Saitama, or did those guys even stand a chance? We'll be getting into all that and more. If you like the content, hit my Cash App to join the VIP lounge of my Discord server, to join in on monthly watch parties. This month we are going to be watching DCEU's The Flash. Now, before analyzing any of Peter Griffin's feats, we first need to establish some key points of relativity. The main Griffin family and their friends occasionally clash and go relative with one another in combat over the course of the show's run. This becomes incredibly relevant when quantifying feats that may be applied across the main cast. For example, I went to the effort myself of calculating a feat for Lois Griffin. In one memorable scene, she throws a tennis ball all the way from Quahog, Rhode Island to Arlen, Texas from King of the Hill out of pure frustration. Based on the distance and time portrayed, with Quahog having no canon location, I just put it roughly on the border of Rhode Island to make this a more conservative estimate, and placed Arlen, Texas relative to Richardson, Texas, the town the King of the Hill was based on. Based on my calculations, the energy output of this ball would have large town level if it was struck at a very short distance, as well as it moving at 4.67% the speed of light, which on the VSBW FTL scale means relativistic speed in the low 2-seat range. Now, since Peter and Lois occasionally spar, this suggests that Peter can reach similar AP and speed to this when he gets a little bit serious, but still holding back as he would obviously not want to permanently maim or kill his loving wife. Now that we have the family's low-end ballpark established, it is time to analyze the full extent of Family Guy's cosmology in order to scale Peter Griffin even further. In the Family Guy verse, God created all things in this cosmology with a fart, as he existed before time and space, and in a later episode of the show, Stewie uses time travel and goes back to the Big Bang, and the return pad explosion of Stewie ends up becoming the Big Bang itself, completing the time loop, and Stewie's device ended up causing God's fart, completing the loop and meaning that Stewie actually tanked the explosion of the Big Bang that also sent him back to the main point in time. This means that God in the Family Guy verse should at least have universal scaling through baseline casual feats alone, and then multiversal scaling for this verse comes in directly from the multiverse machine from the canon Family Guy mobile game, which confirms that an infinite number of infinite multiverse within this cosmology exist. We also know that there are 6 spatial dimensions plus time based on explicit statements in the show, like Peter becoming aware of the 6 dimensions via consumption of Pancresta, as well as a proof of the 5th dimension by Adam West's feat of killing a 5th dimensional version of Alex Trebek. Cutaway gags originate from another dimension known as Cutaway Land, contained in this cosmology, allowing Peter to access it, with statements from the creators that Cutaway Land is a beyond state, somewhat separate from the livable world, but that can be accessed and have matter pulled into it via the main cast. Being able to traverse and manipulate a cosmology of this enormous size naturally launches Peter's capabilities far beyond anything I've previously covered. Now that the basics are outlined, we can finally start quantifying Peter's more ridiculous feats that manipulate Family Guy's massive cosmology. This will shake up the Peter Griffin scaling that you have in your head. You may think that he's some wall-level fat guy that just drives around funny vehicles and makes jokes, but he's serious. I didn't think that he'd be this strong before I started researching this. One of Peter's most insane scaling feats comes from the fact that he has taken multiple hits from God in different sources of material. In one of the Family Guy mobile games, he takes a lightning strike from God while he's flying through the sky, and we hear a holy divination sound whenever it connects, indicating that it is in fact holy lightning sent by God and not just normal lightning. So Peter just tanked that and then kept going with no visible reaction. And then in the show itself, we see God and Peter inside of an elevator in an episode, and God punches Peter in the nuts, and Peter still felt this pain, but he did not bleed, he did not have a visible response, despite the show oftentimes showing us a lot of gore and a lot of character responses. And despite this being an attack directly from God itself, this did not even harm Peter's soul. Now, I went through the effort of quantifying God's punch compared to a fart. I took the average value of a human punch and then amped it a bit, but still kept it below the hardest melee impacts that have ever been produced to keep it a conservative estimate. Assuming that God would be stronger than an average man, but he might be holding back so he wouldn't be using the absolute most force that a human possibly could, full adrenaline amped, yada yada. So, with an above average human punch, this would put God's punch at over 60,000 times stronger than his fart. And if you apply those principles, then that would mean that God's punch versus Peter is, by my calculations, 60,000 times universal. As with his fart alone, he can create an entire infinite cosmology. Which, this also happened to be the perfect median between the high ball and the low ball calcs that another YouTuber discussing the same feat already did. Make sure you check out their video, I'll probably link it down in the description below. Now, this all lines up with Peter's demonstrated reality warping and narrative hacks. Withstanding a punch from a being who created the cosmology he lives in solidly puts Peter in the power bracket of people who scale to their own cosmology. Alongside this would be God himself in the Family Guy verse, and potentially Stewie for tanking the Big Bang, as well as Brian, who was. And we're just getting started analyzing Peter's scaling. Next, let's move on to speed. Cleveland Brown, one of Peter's friends, has went relative to Peter before, and they've ran side by side in multiple different scenarios. And Cleveland has shown feats in his own series of having the ability to fly back in time after building up enough speed by flying around the Earth. This would be an immeasurable speed feat according to VSBW standards. Immeasurable speed allows movement beyond linear time and exceeds quantified values. Immeasurable speed essentially breaks the speed formula by involving time travel itself. And since Peter has previously contended with Cleveland in situations of combat, as well as moving relative to him, he should scale to immeasurable speed range. This allows Peter to move and react beyond the concept of linear time itself. Having immeasurable combat and reaction speed is an absolutely insane level for any character. Like, most of the top tiers of fiction across most verses that you can think of still operate within the parameters of definable speed. Yet, Peter's gags allow him to completely reach this level through just direct scaling to characters that can already do it. This really puts into perspective how broken Toon Force abilities actually are. Even some of the fastest comic book and anime heroes that you can probably think of only reach like quintillions of times FTL speed, but Peter Griffin casually contends with feats that exceed the concept of time altogether. Just another way that Peter's narrative hacks allow him to completely fight outside of his weight class. Now, all of this isn't even mentioning the kinds of equipment that Peter could have at his disposal. Consuming things such as energy drinks, drugs, or alcohol often allow Peter Griffin to perform insane feats and amp his own stats. The highest of these being when he got so high on the fictional drug Pancresta that he revealed the cosmology that contains up to 6 dimensions, and then he ascends beyond his physical form entirely, descends, grabs his phone, and then reascends. He has also been seen being amped before by consuming things such as alcohol and crystal meth, both things that he can easily obtain via cutaway gags and then empower himself even further. Even in a scenario where he is relative to someone in combat, he could always amp himself using his cutaway hacks, grab some radiation from another universe, some drugs, or just drink a Red Bull to make himself faster. He has also obtained the powers of death before, but I personally would not consider this part of Peter's normal kit, as it would be kind of hard to convince death to consistently give Peter his powers, even through a cutaway. So, in conclusion, can Goku beat Peter Griffin? Absolutely fucking not. Not unless you bring in a higher form like Time Patrol Goku, Capsule Corp Goku, or Xenoverse Goku. Does the Dragon Ball verse even stand a chance of taking down this menace? Peter speed blitzes and one-shots if you ignore dimensionality, but if you do take dimensionality into account, then Peter just farts and steals away the entire Dragon Ball cosmology by accident. Thanks for watching, and stay on the lookout for my Patreon coming soon, which is going to feature as well as chapters of my original superhero story, Pearly Gates. Make sure you support my Cash App as well that's on screen to join the Bats Dojo VIP Lounge to join for a monthly movie streaming party. Join the Discord in the description below for free if you just want to join in the discussions and have some fun. Hope you guys have a great day.